According to the Harris County Sheriff's Office, they were called out to an apartment complex in the 15,000 block of West Park for an unresponsive infant. EMS treated that 9-month-old child, but she was later pronounced dead at the hospital.
Welcome or welcome back, and thanks for being here. I'm Cassie, and this is A Wicked World. The story I have for you today is about an 8-month-old baby girl who was horrifically killed by her own father. This is the story of Savayah Mason. Savayah Simone Mason was born in Galloway Township, New Jersey on December 7, 2019. To her mother, Eunice Mason, and her father, Louis Luna. Savayah's parents had met in the mid-2010s when they both attended George Bush High School in Richmond, Texas. Their relationship was rather on and off, but when Louis was 21 and Eunice was 19, they found out that they were expecting a child, and Savayah was born soon after. Louis lived at the Cape Colony apartment complex in Houston, and Eunice would bring Savayah over to see her father about 3 to 4 times each week. The thing is, the apartment was only a 1-bedroom, and Louis lived there along with 5 other men. But since Louis paid some of the rent and he had a child who would sometimes stay with him, he slept in the sunroom, which was just off the living room. The other men who lived there would sleep wherever was convenient. When Savayah went to visit her father, sometimes her mother Eunice would stay and sometimes she wouldn't. Part of the reason that she would not stay sometimes was because Louis was actually seeing another woman named Ashley. So he would make excuses as to why Eunice could not stay the night. Now, even though Louis was clearly not good at being a boyfriend, according to his roommates, he was a great father. They said that he was very protective of his daughter and took good care of her. On the night of Friday, August 21st, 2020, Eunice dropped Savayah off with Louis between 10 and 11 p.m. While doing so, Eunice got into a fight with him, as she thought that there was another woman in his apartment. But she would end up finding out that there was not. She obviously had no idea that he was seeing Ashley, and was actually engaged to her too. The next day, Louis messaged Eunice and asked if he could keep Savayah for the weekend. She agreed. Then on Sunday, August 23rd, Savayah would spend most of her day in Louis's room, though his roommates did see her at some point and said that she looked happy and healthy. That afternoon, around 2 p.m., Louis texted an unknown person, asking them to bring him a gram. That individual later pulled up to the apartment around 3 p.m., and he and Louis exchanged multiple text messages. Now, it's believed that during this transaction, Louis was purchasing cocaine, because he texted his fiancée Ashley shortly after saying, "We gonna see straight." And seeing straight, or having mental clarity, is a common known side effect of the drug. Louis then texted Eunice around 4 p.m. with a picture that he had taken of Savayah a few days prior, and asked if he could keep her for another week so that he could take her to see his people. Eunice once again agreed, but told Louis that she was going to drop off some extra clothing and diapers for the infant. However, Louis argued with her, saying that he had enough for Savayah, and he was actually going to be taking her out that very day to see some relatives. Though he never ended up doing so. Around 6 p.m., Louis texted Ashley, asking her if she was still coming over later, then said that he was going to lie down with Savayah and take a nap. When one of Louis's roommates arrived back home a few hours later, between 8 and 9 p.m., the apartment was dark and the door to the sunroom was closed. Between 8:55 p.m. and 11:43 p.m., Louis's phone was locked and no one was able to get in contact with him. Another one of his roommates woke up around midnight and saw Louis out in the living room. The sunroom was dark and he didn't have Savayah with him. That roommate would fall back asleep. But just minutes later, Louis would come running out of the sunroom screaming, saying that Savayah wasn't breathing. He was holding the baby girl in his arms. Savayah was pale, she had foam coming from her mouth, and her lips were blue. She looked lifeless, and her father seemed completely hysterical. Lewis attempted to give Savayah CPR, while another roommate contacted 911. One of the roommates would initially say that Savayah looked like she had a belt mark on her neck, like someone had tried to tie something real tight to suffocate her. However, this statement was immediately backtracked, and the roommate claimed that he actually meant a belt from a car seat. In the 911 call, you can hear Lewis saying in the background, the belt part was around her neck. The father told his roommates that he had left Savayah sleeping in her car seat, which, first of all, is dangerous in itself. And then when he had later woken up, he found that the car seat straps had choked her, which to me does not seem at all possible with a car seat. How would those straps get around her neck and tighten enough to choke her? Doesn't seem possible. When paramedics arrived on the scene, Lewis was still performing CPR on his daughter, who was then rushed to a nearby hospital. According to first responders, Savayah had ligature marks around her neck and thermal burns near her mouth. The infant was also wearing a very heavily urine-saturated diaper. When the little girl arrived at the emergency room, staff there noticed even further injuries to her body. She had bruising on her forehead, a bruise on her left cheek which looked like a handprint, redness and peeling around her mouth, a bruise on her knee, and abrasions on her neck. There was nothing that could be done to save Savayah, and she was pronounced dead shortly after 1 a.m. on August 24, 2020. An investigation into the baby girl's death was immediately opened. When Lewis was questioned, he claimed that his daughter had breathing problems, and that Savayah sometimes gasped at night while she was sleeping and had noisy inhalation. According to him, in February of 2020, a doctor had diagnosed the baby girl with having a floppy trachea. While this can cause breathing issues, it likely would not have made her suffocate and definitely would not have caused all the other injuries to her body. Contrary to what Lewis claimed, Savayah's mother, Eunice, said that her daughter had no medical issues and only had a diaper rash at the time of her death. As detectives continued to question Lewis, he claimed that he had gone to sleep around 7 p.m., and when he had woken up about an hour later, his daughter was fine. So he went back to sleep, and when he woke up a little while later, close to midnight, he found that the armpit part of the seatbelt in Savayah's car seat was wrapped around her neck. He also stated that his daughter's car seat had been moved, and it was not in the position in which he had left it. When asked about Savayah's other injuries, the father said that his daughter only had typical injuries that babies get. But she's only 8 months old, so what exactly are those types of injuries that an 8-month-old would have, since most of the time they're not even walking yet? According to Lewis, Savayah had fallen in the sink a few days prior while he was giving her a bath, so she would have a bruise on her forehead from that, but nothing else. However, when an autopsy was performed on Savayah, it was found that she had bruises and abrasions all over her body, including on her face, scalp, back, torso, neck, fingers, and toes. She had a hand-shaped mark on her face, which was consistent with a slap. Savayah additionally had a brain bleed. It appeared that the little girl had been suffocated, and she had ligature marks on her ankles. Additionally, she had abrasions, contusions, and tears to her private parts, which were consistent with forceful sex. These injuries showed no signs of healing, meaning that they were recent. When authorities went to Luis's apartment and began to search, they found that underneath his air mattress in the sunroom, there was a bloody baby wipe. Then, in a nearby trash bag, 8 more soiled baby wipes were discovered. A search warrant was also issued for Lewis's phone, and detectives would find that he had been watching pornography between 6:30 and 7 p.m. on August 23rd, the same time that he said he was laying down for a nap with Savayah. Lewis's trial began in September of 2024, and it would last 10 days. In the end, he would be found guilty on his charge of capital murder. He was automatically sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. 8-month-old Savayah Mason's funeral was held shortly after her death, and she was then buried at Forest Park Westheimer Cemetery in Houston, Texas. Thank you to all the patrons of A Wicked World. Now, there's even more of A Wicked World on Patreon, so check it out on patreon.com/awickedworld, or use the Patreon app. You'll have access to exclusive videos each month and more. Any support truly helps to make sure the victims are never forgotten, and to highlight the shortcomings of society associated with each case. Do you have a suggestion for a story you'd like to see me cover? If so, send me an email to awickedworldtruecrime@gmail.com.